Part 41. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mo. Chapter 401. Amidst a series of towering mountains, surrounded by black clouds and mist, steep and winding cliffs, the roars of some ferocious beasts were heard one after another among the mountains, revealing the danger hidden in this vast mountain. Chiang. Suddenly, from the top of a mountain peak deep in the mountains, a burst of chirping sounds of birds and beasts were heard, crying blood and wailing, which was frightening. Then, the towering mountain suddenly collapsed in an instant. All the collapsing rocks fell into the forest below, creating deep pits and causing the surrounding birds and beasts to scatter. As the clouds and mist dispersed, the majestic mountain peak was suddenly smashed from the mountainside by an unknown force. Just after the collapse of the mountain, a huge bird corpse was revealed, and the blood leached from underneath it dyed the entire earth red through its feathers. Countless ferocious beasts hidden in the mountains and forests opened their blood-red eyes at this moment, staring straight at the huge bird and beast corpse on the ground. They all drooled over this corpse, but these ferocious beasts, which were also a source of trouble to the outside world, seemed to be afraid of something. Countless pairs of bloodthirsty eyes were watching deep in the jungle, but not a single ferocious beast dared to step out. Hiss. On the back of this huge bird beast, a tall humanoid figure was trampling on the bird corpse and standing proudly. As the midday sun sheds dim light through the clouds, the face of this figure gradually became clear. This figure was tall and muscular, with muscles all over his body tangled, swollen and bulging. What's strange is that this figure's shoulders are deeply sunken, with a blood-red tumor growing out of it, making slight ups and downs, as if it were a slowly beating heart. However, the most shocking thing is that his fangs protrude from his face and his ears stand upright. He looks like a ferocious wolf-dog monster. This werewolf with a ferocious face was full of ferocity, and his slightly cunning pupils were full of ferocity. He slowly bent down and smeared the blood on the huge bird carcass, then stretched out his long scarlet tongue and licked it slightly. An excited smile suddenly appeared on his ferocious face. At this moment, the werewolf seemed to hear something, his face froze slightly, and he made the sound of grinding his teeth in his mouth. After a moment, he suddenly raised his head and looked towards the distance of the mountain top. His fangs were gloomy. The Lord of Eternal Night. GGG, I would like to taste what the flesh of a person who has broken destiny tastes like. Accompanied by a long roar like a dog's bark, the ferocious beast hidden in the dense forest also echoed with a thundering roar. Hey, Mewtwo, I want to eat that. In the noisy market, a silver-haired girl in a dress pulled the man's clothes, her eyes full of ignorance and innocence. Mewtwo narrowed her eyes and smiled, picking up a bunch of candied haws from the stall and handing it to the girl. Then, with the stall owner looking in astonishment, he took out a piece of crystal core and paid the bill. The silver-haired girl licked the candied haws in her hand and smiled happily. When the other red-haired girl next to her saw this scene, her face showed annoyance. She pulled Mewtwo's clothes and pouted. Brother, Dire wants that. Seeing this, Mewtwo didn't know what the little girl was feeling, so she rubbed the red-haired girl's long, silky hair to comfort her. Then, Mewtwo turned around and looked in the direction Dire pointed. It was a necklace strung together with eyeballs. Mewtwo looked up at the stall owner and saw that the stall owner had dark skin and strong muscles. The head above the neck is like a ferocious pig face, which makes people feel frightened when they see it. This is a member of the Yonjai tribe. Taking another look at the other products in this stall, they all turned out to be crafts like the teeth of wild beasts and the heads of ferocious beasts. Similarly, Mewtwo took out a crystal core from her arms. The Yonjai tribesman actually accepted the crystal core without any strangeness, turned around and took out the eyeball necklace stored with special technology on the shelf and handed it to the girl in the red dress. Only then did Dire's face show a smile again, blooming like a gorgeous rose. Mewtwo nodded, and next to him were two petite girls, one on the left and one on the right, as if they were twin girls. Relying on her huge soul source, Miu also successfully rescued Mia Miao's critically ill body from the hospital bed. The three of them were walking on the newly constructed Yuhei Street, with bustling markets and noisy crowds on both sides. Among the crowd were ordinary survivors from Yuhei and other bases, as well as people from the Yanjai tribe created by Miu. The survivors were mixed with the Yanjai people, and the surrounding architectural styles with obvious foreign characteristics made people feel like they were in a different world full of demons. What was even more strange was that Miu and the two girls were walking swaggeringly in the bustling market, but no one around them was surprised or frightened. After all, the person in front of them is the founder of the Eternal Night dynasty, the veritable master of the city, the Lord of Eternal Night. Even those members of the Yanjai clan who were created by Miu himself frequently passed by Miu, but no one realized that the person in front of them was the Supreme King who created them. Tianlai Novel Network. Walking on the street holding the delicate little hands of the two women, in the eyes of these ordinary people, Miu's sense of existence seemed to have been reduced to the freezing point. Miu, who exited the candle dragon form, seemed to have become an ordinary person in the eyes of everyone, and no one cared. Walking on the rebuilt streets of Yuhei, Miu was somewhat amused and confused as he watched the buildings carefully constructed by the Eternal Night clan along the way. The overall tone of the entire street was gray. Some buildings were even built in the shape of some monster's head, which looked weird and had a bit of violent aesthetics. Will these guys really transform this place into a demon world? Miu imagined the scene of his territory in the future with all kinds of races mixed and hundreds of beasts galloping. But this is exactly what he wants to create, a powerful kingdom that can truly accommodate all kinds of creatures. Miu looked up at the vast sky. Through the clouds, he seemed to be looking at a vertical eye in the sky. The vertical eye was full of indifference, looking down on all living things, without any emotion. Only when he looked at Miu, a hint of anger appeared in the depths of his pupils, and then he retreated into the layers of clouds and mist, and disappeared. Miu's mouth curled up a smile. The will of heaven looked at everything, but only cared for himself. It seems that he was subject to some rules, and the consciousness of the way of heaven could not directly attack him. But Miu had a hunch in his heart that when a certain opportunity came, the so-called way of heaven would definitely attack him without mercy. Miu was the only one who could be targeted by the will of heaven. Miu, look over there. Meow Meow tugged at the corner of Miu's clothes, with curiosity in her clear eyes. Miu looked over and saw a noisy sound coming from the front for some reason, which quickly attracted a large number of onlookers. Miu led the two girls into the crowd of onlookers, and what they saw was a scene of a fierce battle between a human and another member of the Eternal Night tribe. A well-dressed man holding a laser weapon in his hand launched a fierce attack on the Eternal Night man in front of him. The latter was also unwilling to be outdone, and his evil eyes were full of fierceness, launching a fatal attack on the human man. The two of them quarreled at some point, and turned into a life-and-death battle. The fierce battle immediately attracted onlookers. However, Miu, who saw this scene, did not think of stopping it, but watched this chicken fight with interest. However, he seemed to remember that open private fighting in the base was against the ban. The fight between the two became more and more tragic, and soon the surrounding stalls were swept and destroyed. The Eternal Night tribe member was blinded by the laser, and the human man had his arm torn to pieces. Just when both sides were injured, the crowd of onlookers was suddenly opened from the outside, and a law enforcement team in uniform walked out. Under the fearful gaze of the crowd, the two seriously injured people were taken away by the law enforcement team. What awaits them will be the harsh punishment personally formulated by the White Death. The onlookers dispersed one after another, in a hurry, not daring to provoke the law enforcement team. The White Death was like a guillotine hanging over everyone's head. As long as they do something that violates the law, they will swing down the cold blade without mercy. Miu smiled and shook his head when he saw this. It must be said that Ji Yufeng is indeed an extremely sharp knife, whether it is for the outside or for the inside. The crowds around dispersed, and the market returned to a lively scene. Mu Qiu was going to take the two girls to continue shopping. But suddenly, Mu Qiu seemed to sense something, his eyes moved slightly, and he turned around suddenly. Who is it? Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mo Xian Yu. Chapter 402. Mu Qiu turned around, but suddenly found that the space around him turned into darkness in an instant. With Mu Qiu as the center, the whole world became extremely dark and empty. Even Dire and Meow Meow beside him disappeared. Mu Qiu's face was slightly condensed, looking straight at the depths of darkness in front of him. I saw a mysterious figure in a white robe standing not far in front of Mu Qiu. This figure was covered with white robes, making it difficult to see his face. Standing in the depths of darkness, it seemed to be the only light in the darkness. Who is it? Mu Qiu stared at the white-robed figure in front of him, his cold eyes flashed. The other party's existence is extremely strange. It is not a soul state, nor does it look like an illusion. The mysterious man in white robe looked at Mu Qiu's figure, and was silent for a long time. Then he said in a hoarse voice, "You use the king's power to fight against the way of heaven, which is not tolerated by the way of heaven. The sky is broken and the earth is incomplete. The road to Lingtian will be full of twists and turns, and your fate will be modeled." The voice of the white-robed man was so low that it seemed like a mixed sound, and it was difficult to tell whether it was male or female. As the white-robed man spoke, his figure gradually became dimmer and dimmer, and finally it was like a stuck tape. The catastrophe is coming, and the time left for you is not much. Gather the 8 sources of creation, stop the alien source. Southern Xinjiang, found in the southern border. In the end, the words of the white-robed man became intermittent and unclear. As if he had leaked the secret of heaven, the figure of the mysterious white-robed man quickly dimmed. In a flash, the body of the white-robed man merged into the boundless darkness and disappeared. The surrounding darkness quickly receded like a tide. "Brother, what's wrong with you?" Dire's puzzled voice came to his ears. Mu Qiu looked down and saw Dire standing beside him, tilting her head and looking at him in confusion. The noisy noise echoed in his ears, and Mu Qiu returned to the familiar Yuhei market. Rubbing the girl's hair, Mu Qiu slowly shook his head. Nothing. Dire looked at Mu Qiu's handsome face, and the corner of her mouth still had that faint smile. But the girl felt inexplicably that after that moment, her brother became a little strange. At night, on the top of the high-rise building in the center of Yuhei, the cool breeze blew, and Mu Qiu, wearing a black robe, stood in the wind. Looking up at the dark sky covered by the mist again, Mu Qiu's eyes became a little deep. 8 origins of creation. The mysterious white-robed man who suddenly appeared and the words he said shocked Mu Qiu. There are still many unanswered questions in the words of the white-robed man. What are the 8 sources of creation? What is in the southern border? What is the relationship between this and the alien religion? Even the identity of the white-robed man, what is his purpose? He has no idea, which makes Mu Qiu feel very confused. Looking at the unfathomable sky, he felt more and more that there was a layer of confusing dark fog spreading quietly. Mu Qiu suddenly looked at the far southern end. Southern border. He suddenly remembered that after the last sign-in, the system told him that the next sign-in location was also in the southern border. It seemed that there was an invisible pusher in the dark, guiding him to the unknown southern border. Will this be an enemy trap? His eyes narrowed slightly, and it was not Mu Qiu's usual style to worry too much. Instead of passively accepting the enemy, it is better to take the initiative. He wants to see what tricks are in the southern border. You really don't let me rest for a moment. Mu Qiu sighed, clapped his hands, and a black shadow vortex suddenly appeared behind him. A woman wearing a tight cheongsam and a slender figure walked slowly from the shadows. "Master Muqiu, what is the matter with calling me here this time?" Lu Qianqian leaned against Muqiu's back charmingly, her voice was charming, and her delicate chin rested on the man's shoulder, extremely tempting. A black iron token with ghost fire hanging on a thin rope around the woman's waist. Muqiu said lightly. "You should know something about the southern border, right?" According to Xiao Hanyan, Lu Qianqian's hometown is from the southern border. It seems that she heard that Muqiu's tone was a little different from before, so Lu Qianqian naturally didn't dare to be presumptuous. He quickly leaned forward and said solemnly, "Sir, the southern border spans thousands of kilometers, with continuous mountains, and there are many ferocious beasts in the mountains and rivers of 100,000 miles. There, even the existence of zombies is quite rare, and the land including the border has long been reduced to the nest of heretic beasts." Muqiu looked at Lu Qianqian, who seemed to know a lot about the post-apocalyptic southern border. "If I say, I want to go to the southern border now, can you lead the way?" Lu Qianqian's face condensed, and her beautiful eyes blinked. Ah! For some reason, when she heard Muqiu asking her to lead the way to the southern border, Lu Qianqian's eyes showed a complex look, and she hesitated. "What, when? Right now?" Eh. Before Lu Qianqian could react, a ball of black flames had swept her up and fled into the distance. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sign in at the end of the world. Start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mo. Chapter 403. The army of the Eternal Night Dynasty swept all the way, conquering the ruins of major cities at a speed as fast as a bamboo. Countless human bases and ruins that have become zombie kingdoms belong to the Eternal Night Dynasty. This also makes the Eternal Night Dynasty the true dominant force in the entire Dongxiao domain. There are only a handful of such powerful forces in the world. However, the attitude of the outside world towards the Eternal Night people is very taboo. Some people call this race with cruel and evil nature the Eternal Night Evil Clan, and regard it as another natural enemy of humans besides zombies. Some human bases have even regarded the Dongxiao domain where the Eternal Night Dynasty is located as a human restricted area, prohibiting awakeners from entering without permission. But there is no doubt that in this cruel doomsday, the situation of mankind has become increasingly difficult. Just when the major human bases are worried about the future of the human race, a fierce battle is still going on in some unknown directions. On a remote abandoned road, a large group of zombies were attracted here, and among them were also a group of monsters with special body shapes. A team of dozens of people was surrounded by zombies. However, what was surprising was that this team of dozens of people did not show any signs of panic when faced with hundreds of mutant zombies. Facing the zombie monsters rushing towards them, some people in the team expanded rapidly and turned into a huge orc monster. Some people released powerful energy fluctuations around their bodies, and those zombies were blocked by invisible barriers before they rushed to them. This is a team of all awakened people. The man at the head of the team had a handsome face, holding a silver long sword, and exuded a unique charm from head to toe. Several mutant zombies attacked him, and the handsome man swung his knife and chopped them down. Several cold rays flashed, and several mutant zombies were strangled into pieces. There were several companions fighting side by side with the handsome man, and there were even awakened ones with more outstanding strength. But the former seemed to have an irresistible charm, which attracted the girls around him to look at him frequently, with their eyes shining. After a while, the abandoned road was covered with broken corpses of zombies, and the blood turned the road into a bloody road. On the other hand, although some of the awakened team were pale and tired, there were no obvious casualties. They were the awakened team that went out from the base to perform tasks, and their strength was not the same as that of ordinary human survivors. It was difficult for ordinary mutant zombies to cause harm to them. Yunyi, the Wangcheng base is not far ahead. Do we really want to go there to investigate? A sturdy orc man walked towards the handsome man holding a long sword and hesitated. The other newcomers in the team are already a little tired. I'm afraid they won't be able to bear it if they continue like this. The main purpose of their team's trip is to explore and record the intelligence in some distant city ruins. There are also some awakened newbies in the team who came out to train. Going further will get close to the territory of the Eternal Night Dynasty. I heard that the Eternal Night Evil clan is bloodthirsty and brutal by nature. Even the Wangcheng base was slaughtered by them, and hundreds of thousands of human beings were destroyed by the Eternal Night Evil clan's butcher knife. The orc man said seriously, and cold sweat could not help dripping from his forehead. The words of caring for the newcomers just now were just his excuses. What really worried him was the brutal Eternal Night Evil clan. The handsome man called Yunyi looked at the silent sky in the distance and said, "This is just the border area of Dongxiao territory. No matter how long the tentacles of the Eternal Night Dynasty are, they can't reach so far." As he said this, the handsome man glanced at the crowd behind him. He shook his hair with a long knife in his hand, his eyes were deep, and he said righteously, "Even if the Eternal Night Evil clan is here, I, Xiao Yunyi, can fight it alone. Don't even think about invading my human territory." The man named Xiao Yunyi has a handsome temperament and a handsome face. Coupled with these righteous words, he instantly captured the hearts of the women behind him. Brother Xiao is so handsome. How can the Eternal Night Evil clan be able to defeat Brother Xiao's Tianyu long knife? Xiao Yunyi seemed a little flattered by the praise of the women. He said this for a reason. In fact, he had received news that the army of the Eternal Night Dynasty had left the territory of Wangcheng base some time ago. In addition, the humans in Wangcheng base were slaughtered, and now Wangcheng is just an empty city, with only some zombie heretics attracted here. He no longer takes ordinary monsters and heretics seriously, which is obvious in the battle just now. There are thousands of mutant zombies, and he, Xiao Yunyi, killed nearly one-third of them alone. As one of the few S-level awakeners in the team, and the young master of the Yungxiao city, he has countless life-saving equipment. This is what Xiao Yunyi relies on. After pretending to be cool in front of everyone, Xiao Yunyi happily walked towards a beautiful figure standing at the back of the team. The woman was wearing loose casual clothes, and the trousers on her lower body perfectly set off her slender figure. She has delicate features, and looks like a fairy, except for a dark scar that spreads across her entire face. Even so, it is difficult to hide her graceful and beautiful appearance. "Fanyan, this is your first time to carry out a mission. Can you hold on?" Xiao Yunyi walked to the woman with a charming smile and said softly, his eyes full of affection. This made the women beside Ye Fanyan very jealous, and they looked at the former with jealousy. Seeing Xiao Yunyi's great courtesy, Ye Fanyan frowned slightly and said lightly, "I'm fine." After several rounds of zombie attacks, Ye Fanyan's face did not show any sign of fatigue. She did not tell Xiao Yunyi that in another time and space that was on the verge of collapse, the enemies she faced were much more terrifying than these zombie monsters. Seeing Ye Fanyan's cold attitude towards him, Xiao Yunyi was not annoyed, but just smiled and said that if there was any difficulty, he could ask him for help. After Xiao Yunyi left, the girl with twin ponytails beside Ye Fanyan looked at Ye Fanyan in confusion and said, "Sister Fanyan, Xiao Yunyi is still very good to you, why don't you consider it?" Everyone in Yungxiao city knows that since the eldest lady of the Ye family woke up, her temperament has changed drastically. Her crazy personality is gone, and her appearance is becoming more and more beautiful. Even the second young master of the Xiao family, who originally looked down on the eldest lady of the Ye family, began to show her great courtesy to her. Before, the second young master of the Xiao family, Xiao Yuntian, showed his courtesy to her in the world of the God realm, and after returning to reality, The eldest young master of the Xiao family, Xiao Yunyi, also pursued her fanatically. Jing Jing. Yafanyan seemed to be thinking about something, and only came to her senses after hearing the words of the girl with twin ponytails. She glanced at Xiao Yunyi's back and shook her head slowly. For some reason, she always felt a strange breath on the latter. She could only blame the remnant soul of her previous life, but she didn't feel anything about Xiao Yunyi. Looking up at the distant sky, Yafanyan felt an inexplicable sense of uneasiness in her heart. Was it an illusion? Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MOCNU. Chapter 404. At dusk, twilight fell, and the surrounding sky took on a hazy color. I don't know how long it took, but as the setting sun was shining in the sky, a sudden gust of wind suddenly passed through the sky. Roads of scorching black flames split the sky, and the temperature in the air seemed to have increased a lot under the burning of the black flames. Lord Mu-Chiu, the area in front is the scope of Wangcheng Base. A charming voice came in the air, and a red fiery silhouette was seen passing through the air under the shroud of black flames. Lu Qianqian was hugged by Mu-Chiu, her slender jade fingers pointed forward. Mu-Chiu was still wearing a black windbreaker, with a pair of wings of flowing fire composed of black flames spread out behind her, showing extraordinary power. Wangcheng Base. Mu-Chiu narrowed her eyes slightly and looked into the distance. He suddenly remembered the information in Xiao Hanyan's mouth, and his eyes looked thoughtful. Go down and have a look. Lu Qianqian, who was picked up by Mu-Chiu, had a wry smile on her face. She already regretted her role as a tour guide. Lord Mu-Chiu, the Southern Territory is extremely dangerous. Why don't we just forget it? Mu-Chiu lowered her head and looked at the beauty in her arms. You seem to be a little afraid of southern Xinjiang. Where is there? Lu Qianqian smiled when she heard this, her smile was very forced. At dusk and sunset, the two of them passed through the sky like a black stream of light. In less than a moment, the building group at the far end was already revealed. The city wall that originally stood has been demolished by the surging Yanjai army, leaving ruins everywhere. Up until this point, no problem could be seen, but the deeper into the city, a trace of blood gradually emerged from the edge of the base. The rich color of blood soaked the entire city, and the dried blood on the streets even dyed the earth red. In the deep darkness below the city, you can still vaguely see pairs of bloodthirsty pupils and huge outlines. These are heretical monsters attracted by the strong smell of blood. With the wings of tragedy stirring, Mu-Chiu brought Lu Qianqian to the streets in the center of the city. As soon as Fang stepped onto this empty street, the strong smell of blood and rotting corpses hit his nostrils. I saw that both sides of the road were full of damaged and rotting corpses. Some corpses had been eaten by zombie beasts, leaving only their white skeletons. The severed head and blood were splashed on the ground, and the deep-set eyes were full of unwillingness and resentment. The mottled bloodstains on the ground seemed to tell the story of the tragic massacre that the city had endured before. The icy cool breeze blows through the gaps in the tall buildings, like the wails and cries of ghosts. Is this the Wangcheng base? Lu Qianqian walked out of Mu-Chiu's arms and looked at the corpses scattered around her, with a look of horror in her eyes. Wangcheng base is also a large human base, how could it be massacred like this? The two looked around and finally came to a relatively complete pile of corpses on the street. Lu Qianqian also squatted down and observed the mutilated corpse. Except for the traces of monster bites, these people were all fatally struck by some kind of sharp weapon. At this moment, Lu Qianqian transformed into a top detective, analyzing and studying the causes of death of these people. Her beautiful eyes looked particularly serious. The cause of death of these people is very strange. Lu Qianqian squatted down and observed the dense pile of corpses. Her eyebrows furrowed, and a complicated look appeared in her eyes. Some people had their hearts pierced by thin needles, and some had their heads cut off with a single blow. Some even had their limbs cut off and watched themselves bleed to death. Lu Qianqian has experienced the apocalypse and thinks she is used to seeing many cruel and bloody horror scenes. But the scene in front of her still gave her an uncontrollable desire to vomit. This is no longer a simple massacre, but more like a random and crazy killing. Lu Qianqian stared at the cross-section of a mutilated corpse, lightly opened her red lips, and murmured. These fatal wounds are more likely to have been made by one person. The weapons used were slender and extremely sharp, like silk. Mu Qiu on the side suddenly said, and Lu Qianqian turned her head. He picked up a rotten severed hand without hesitation and looked at the remaining blood spattered on it with a deep look. Putting down his severed hand, Mu Qiu turned around and headed towards the depths of the base. At this moment, a low roar suddenly came from the deep alley nearby. A rotten mutated zombie came towards Mu Qiu with its fangs and claws spread out. Mu Qiu turned around expressionlessly, and at the same time raised her right arm when the zombies rushed towards her. The ferocious zombie's face was clamped by Mu Qiu's right hand for an instant, and then he was pressed down violently, and the rotting body immediately fell to the ground. A large ball of black flames spurted out, and the mutated zombie didn't even have a chance to cry out. In the blink of an eye, it was burned into a puddle of ashes and scattered on the ground. The whole process happened in an instant, and the raging black flames disappeared in an instant. Lu Qianqian. With a silly look on her face, Lu Qianqian subconsciously followed Mu Qiu's footsteps, and the two of them arrived at a square deep in the base. On the empty square, a blood-red pupil was painted with blood, and 6 megatomas surrounded the pupil, like overlapping blood moons. It seems that someone is really thoughtful to add to my reputation. Mu Qiu smiled and narrowed his eyes, and a cold chill flashed in his eyes. He turned around and looked at the deep city buildings, and the roar of the beast could be vaguely heard. Mu Qiu looked at Lu Qianqian and said, "Let's go, it's almost time for us to set off for the next stop." A boiling black flame swept over the city. Mu Qiu spread his wings on his back and picked up Lu Qianqian by the waist, and was about to escape to the distant horizon. At sunset, Mu Qiu's figure turned into a beam of black light in the sky. Just at the moment when he flew out of the Wangcheng base, Mu Qiu seemed to have sensed something, and his figure suddenly stagnated in the air, and his eyes suddenly looked forward. At this moment, the space in front of Mu Qiu suddenly burst into silver light, rippling waves. 3 red-robed figures walked out from the spatial ripples and blocked his way. This is the 12 sacrificial immortals. Sign in at the end of the world. Start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mo. Chapter 405. 12 Immortal Priests. At dusk, Mu Qiu stood in the sky above Wangcheng, looking at the 3 red figures that suddenly appeared in the distance, her eyes twinkling. He really didn't expect that the heterogeneous cult would intercept and kill him at this time. Is that mysterious man in white robe a trap? At this moment, Mu Qiu thought of many possibilities in her mind, but rejected them one by one. He came to Wangcheng base just on a temporary basis, and there was no way the other party would have expected something to happen and was waiting for him here in advance. One of the men in red robes suddenly appeared and said in a low voice, "Lord of Eternal Night." Although he asked, his tone was affirmative. In the Battle of Dawn, the image of the Lord of Eternal Night with his waist-down red hair, handsome appearance and evil temperament has been deeply rooted in the hearts of the people. But if someone is interested in checking Mu Qiu's previous whereabouts, it will not be difficult to find his original face. With a smile on her lips, Mu Qiu looked at the red figure in front of her and suddenly smiled. "It seems that I am really popular. I can make your teacher come to trouble me again and again." The man in the middle has a red robe lined with a raincoat, a bamboo hat on his head, and a bamboo stick in his hand. The man in red robe wearing a bamboo hat didn't care about Mu Qiu's teasing, and his tone was calm. "You created things without authorization and used royal power to enter the Tao. You have offended the power of heaven. A disaster is coming. Our holy religion will act on behalf of heaven today and kill the evil demons. As soon as the man finished speaking, another red-robed figure beside him suddenly stretched out his hand, and the energy around him surged. Suddenly, a hurricane roared, and an invisible energy wave instantly covered 100 miles radius. Continuous space fluctuations instantly enveloped the entire area, including the Wangcheng base at your feet. Space enchantment. Feeling the raging spatial fluctuations around her, Mu Chiu's eyes moved slightly. The other party seems to be afraid that he will escape, so he has taken the lead in setting up a space barrier. It seems that you have convinced me. Mu Chiu looked at the three figures in red robes floating side by side. The moment he took action, he had already sensed the opponent's level of strength. Three destructive powerhouses. Looking at the world, although the destruction-level powerhouses are powerful, they are also guardian-level existences in a human base. But in front of Mu Chiu now, it is no longer enough. His intuition told him that the other party must have someone else to rely on. Find a place to hide yourself. Mu Chiu turned her head and looked at Lu Qianqian beside her, and said. Lu Qianqian's delicate body trembled when she heard this. Her beautiful eyes looked around at the completely enclosed space. Her eyes were dull. This place is bounded by a barrier for hundreds of miles. Where can she hide? Why are you talking so much nonsense to him? I've long wanted to taste the taste of the Corpse King. The man in red robe who had been silent on the other side seemed to be unable to hold on any longer. He raised his hood and suddenly raised his head to look at Mu Chiu, revealing a pair of greedy and bloodthirsty crimson pupils. What appeared in front of Mu Chiu's eyes was a ferocious face that looked like a wolf and a leopard, covered in red. Immediately afterwards, the red leopard man flashed and turned into a crimson afterimage in the air. In an instant, a howling wind suddenly came from behind Mu Chiu. The red leopard man's ferocious face was full of ferocity, and he actually intended to kill Mu Chiu with one blow. Just when the sinister claws were about to grab Mu Chiu's heart, a ball of extremely hot black karma fire suddenly exploded in the air. A flash of surprise flashed in the red leopard man's eyes, and he stepped back at the same time. I saw a huge skeleton giant, its body wrapped in black and red flames rising from the ground behind Mu Chiu. A blood-red color suddenly appeared in Mu Chiu's eyes, and 6 rounds of Megatama were circling around her eyes, like a blood moon overlapping each other. Eternal Mangekyo Sherinan. As soon as the skeleton giant appeared in the world, the flames of judgment like the underworld were suddenly released. Even the surrounding air seemed to be extremely hot. At this moment, the red-robed figure in the distance wearing a bamboo hat and a koi raincoat also raised his head. What appeared in front of Mu Chiu was a young man with fair skin and a handsome face. The fair-skinned man has an ordinary face. The only thing that is different from ordinary people is his eye sockets as deep as black holes and his dull expression. Next to the fair-skinned man, the figure whose whole body was covered by a red robe and whose back was straight stood in the sky. Space ripples gathered around him, eventually forming a giant sky-swallowing python that was more than 10 feet long. The giant space python swallowed the snake letter and stood face to face with the giant skeleton wrapped in karma. Raging energy fluctuations filled the sky, and the afterglow of the flames overlapped with the dusk, reflecting 3 figures in red robes as bright as blood in the distance. After the failure of the Battle of Dawn, the heterogeneous cult that always controls the behind-the-scenes. Finally unable to suppress the violent murderous intention in their hearts, the 3 emissaries personally went out to encircle and kill Mu Chiu. In an instant, a siege and killing battle against the Lord of Eternal Night is about to begin. Just as a shocking battle broke out in the sky, the Wangcheng base below was shrouded in space barriers. The many ferocious beasts attracted by the rich blood seemed to sense danger at this moment. These ferocious beasts all let out shrill roars from their mouths, and scuttled out of the dark corners one after another. The originally dead city was instantly ignited by the roar of the ferocious beast. On a remote street in the city, a team of dozens of people was fighting fiercely with the rampaging monsters. Xiao Yunyi killed a zombie that was rushing towards him, and bright red blood dripped from the blade. He looked up at the distant sky with a horrified look, and the majestic energy fluctuations made him feel a throbbing from the bottom of his heart. What happened there? The next moment, surging space ripples swept over the entire city. The barrier composed of space ripples instantly imprisoned and enveloped the entire Wangcheng base. This scene instantly frightened the awakened people in the team and made them at a loss. What is going on? However, before everyone could react, the surging flames had already swept from the sky. The flames with destructive power rushed to the earth, and countless zombie beasts were burned to slag the moment they came into contact with the residual power of the flames. Even some awakened people on the edge of the city were annihilated by the impact of the flames and the space torrent. The majestic energy swept the entire city like a catastrophe, and this also completely aroused the fear in the hearts of many awakened people. Quick, run! I don't know who spoke first, and the entire awakened team was in chaos in an instant. The remaining awakened people ran towards the depths of the city in a panic. Boom! Behind them, there were sounds of buildings collapsing one after another. The impact of black flames and space ripples caused large areas of buildings to collapse and fall. This kind of energy fluctuation. In the fleeing crowd, Ye Fanyan looked up at the sky behind her as if she had sensed something, and her eyes like water were beating. Around her neck, a dark green jade pendant was still emitting a faint light. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mo. Chapter 406. Above the Wangcheng base, black and red flames stained the gradually fading twilight. The majestic energy fluctuations swept across the sky, and the surrounding space was distorted and collapsed at this moment. A skeleton giant stood upright, with two horns on his head and a pair of black and red wings behind him, showing infinite power. Holding the Yama demon sword, he walked on the waves of fire, like a Shuryaksha walking out of the hell. Just above the head of the skeleton giant, there stood a man in a black robe, with an indifferent face, overlooking all living things. Not far in front of the skeleton giant, a transparent giant python formed by the aggregation of space ripples was lying in the sky, emitting amazing energy fluctuations all over its body. In the gaps of the body composed of space ripples, black flames of karma burned, and the transparent giant python also let out a long painful hiss. And the skeleton giant under Muchu also showed traces of fine cracks on the bones wrapped in flames. These cracks were healing rapidly at a speed visible to the naked eye. Beside the skeleton giant, a monster with muscles and a face like a wolf and a leopard floated in the air. His body was covered with burn marks from the flames, and the rotten flesh covered the red skin, which looked extremely creepy. But even so, this hideous leopard monster still did not show any signs of decline, but the fierceness in his eyes became more intense. On the other side of the sky, the man in the bamboo hat who had been watching and not moving had no expression on his face. A pair of pure black pupils stared at the sky-supporting skeleton giant, and said in a dull tone, "You are worthy of being the Lord of Eternal Night, you can fight against the two of them without using the power of the Source of Tao." Seeing that his two companions were in decline, the man in the bamboo hat still had no change in his expression. He looked up at the boundless sky. The sun was setting in the west, and the sky was faintly covered by a layer of dark clouds. The time is almost right. The man in the bamboo hat moved his lips, as if chanting some spell. At the same time, a battle in the distance was about to come to an end. The skin of the space python showed cracks, and even the space would be twisted and shattered under the burning of the black flames. Muchu stood safely on the head of the skeleton giant, but his expression seemed a little inexplicable. The red leopard man and the space python's controllers were strong, and it can even be said that their strengths were rare even among all the destruction-level strongmen. Mu-Chiu spent a lot of effort to deal with the two without entering the candle dragon form and using the power of the Deyuan realm. But with the sinister style of the alien source religion, they would never come to trouble him so easily. At this moment, Mu-Chiu suddenly sensed something and turned his head to look at the man in the bamboo hat who had not moved. At this moment, the man in the bamboo hat moved his lips, as if he was telling something, and his face was still expressionless. At the same time as the man in the bamboo hat spoke, the fierce-eyed leopard man and the masked man who controlled the space also moved in an instant. The former's eyes were filled with strong ferocity, and his eyes were full of bloodthirsty murderous intent when he looked at Mu-Chiu. He grinned with a sharp mouth full of fangs and laughed wildly. "Your death has come." The leopard man suddenly tore his upper body robe to pieces, revealing a red body full of gnarled muscles. However, a fist-sized tumor grew on his shoulder. With a loud shout from the leopard man, the tumor actually began to swell outward, and a deep red box emerged from the surging blood and flesh. Similarly, such a deep red box exuding an ancient atmosphere emerged from the bodies of the man in the bamboo hat and the masked man, Tianlai novel network. The blood-like deep red box seemed to be embedded in their bodies, connected to their flesh and blood, inseparable. This is... Mu-Chiu's eyes flashed with a sharp light. He was very familiar with this box. He even snatched a similar box from the hands of the alien section. And what was imprisoned in that box was the soul of the candle dragon that gave Mu-Chiu a new form. And now, when such a red box appeared in the bodies of the three people, the candle dragon bloodline in Mu-Chiu's body seemed to be attracted by something and warned Mu-Chiu. "You can force us to use this power, and you have no regrets about your death, Lord of the Eternal Night." The leopard man with fierce eyes suddenly cut his fingertips and dripped blood into the hole of the red box embedded in the flesh and blood, and a low roar came from his throat. "Come out of the world dash. Zhen." In an instant, it seemed to be responding to the leopard man's fierce shout. The crimson box opened wide, and a roar like hitting a stone came from inside. A huge phantom of a ferocious beast rushed out of the crimson box, shaped like a leopard, and rushed directly into the body of the leopard man. At the same time, a red box also appeared between the eyebrows of the man in the bamboo hat. A ferocious phantom of a sheep's head rushed out of the box and also roared into the body of the man in the bamboo hat. In front of the space border in the distance, a dark giant python rushed out from the chest of the masked man, and drove straight into the masked man's head. Almost in an instant, a phantom of a soul with an ancient breath rushed out of the box fed by the flesh and blood of the three people at the same time, and then all entered the bodies of the three people. And the three people's bodies also burst out with a terrifying breath in an instant. The most intuitive thing is that some kind of change has occurred in the bodies of the three people. With the blessing of rich blood energy, Leopard Man's body increased dozens of times out of thin air, and he could stand shoulder to shoulder with the huge skeletal giant. A single horn sprouted from its face, its back was curved, its skin was red, and 5 tails with hooks grew out of its back. The figure of the man in the bamboo hat has not changed at all, except that demonic goat horns have grown out of his head, and his pupils are as deep as black holes. The body of the space python under the masked man swelled, and it actually grew a pair of dark wings, and its originally transparent body became dark. The majestic energy raged in the sky of this world, and the surrounding space was twisted and shattered under the impact of the energy flow. There seemed to be a vertical eye emerging above the dark sky, but its pupils were closed, sensing some kind of existence. Mu-Chiu, who was standing on top of the giant skeleton, had some realization and looked up at the 3 figures that had undergone tremendous changes. "So, is this what you rely on for this trip?" Although it was not clear how the alien religion used these ancient creatures to improve its strength, Mu-Chiu could clearly feel a trace of the aura belonging to the source in these 3 people. Although the aura was not clear, even Mu-Chiu concluded that none of the 3 people had found their Tao. but the aura exuding from the bodies of these three people is undoubtedly beyond the level of destruction. At least at this moment, they have all become principal source level powerhouses. What Mu-Chiu has to face next is 3 principal level existences. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 407. Crack. The sound of shattering began to resound throughout the sky, and even the surrounding space was shaken and collapsed by the 3 sudden devouring level pressures. Countless fine space fragments fell in midair and were quickly absorbed by the space ripples. Only the space barrier that imprisoned the entire Wangcheng base did not collapse, but became more stable after the masked man's strength increased greatly. The 3 red-robed alien cult members opened the red box nourished in their flesh and blood, and after integrating the ancient spirit imprisoned in it, they were promoted to the Deyuan level existence. Even Mu-Chiu's eyes became serious after feeling the 3 violent auras far beyond the destruction level. Mastering the ancient spirit, he can also integrate it with himself and enter the Deyuan realm with this special method. His intuition told him that the alien cult must have great ambitions. 3 Deyuan level auras surrounded Mu-Chiu from 3 directions, and the ancient energy was rampaging. Lord of the Eternal Night, today is your death. With a sharp shout like hitting a stone, the man who turned into a ferocious red leopard under the blessing of boundless blood and energy rushed towards the skeleton giant. The huge body of dozens of meters high was like a prehistoric monster, with 5 tails standing upside down behind it, and the ancient aura pressed the space to collapse inch by inch. At the same time, the space giant python behind the skeleton giant also opened its fangs and bit towards Mu-Chiu on the top of the skeleton. Looking for death. Mu-Chiu's eyes were surrounded by megatamo-like overlapping blood moons, driving the skeleton giant under him to swing the magic knife and chop it down. However, at this moment, a strange chant suddenly came from the other side in the distance. The man in the bamboo hat who had not moved before suddenly looked in the direction of the skeleton giant. The lips moved, and faint light appeared in the dark and empty pupils. The man in the bamboo hat suddenly uttered an obscure and strange chant. As he chanted, a series of materialized golden runes appeared on the skeleton giant's body. The materialized golden spell quickly wrapped around the huge skeleton giant. Through the blazing black flames, it bound the skeleton giant's body like a pair of arms. Taking advantage of the skeleton giant's body being restricted, the ferocious red leopard and the space python attacked from the front and back, and the surging blood and the majestic space force all bombarded the skeleton giant. The raging Deyuan level energy instantly exploded around the skeleton giant. The golden runes that filled the sky dissipated, and the majestic black flames surrounded Mu-Chiu, without any damage. However, the skeleton of the huge Susanoo giant under him appeared with spiderweb-like cracks. If you don't use that power, you won't be able to survive. In the distance, the man wearing a straw hat and a raincoat said with a hollow look in his eyes. As soon as the words fell, the 5 red tails formed by blood behind the ferocious red leopard shot out towards the huge skeleton giant. The majestic blood hit the boiling black flames, and a blood mist suddenly exploded in the sky. When the blood mist dissipated, a handsome figure wearing red armor was seen standing in the air. The huge skeleton phantom behind him slowly dissipated, and the red figure slowly walked out of the boiling flames. A head of blood-red long hair fell to the waist, and the handsome and strange face was like a banished immortal. The evil eyes were full of indifference at this moment. As you wish. Mu-Chiu, wearing the candle dragon armor, had a domineering aura that looked down on all living beings. He reached into the red flame vortex in front of him. Accompanied by a dragon roar, a domineering long sword wrapped in red flames and with a sword body like dragon scales appeared in the world. Indistinctly, a long red dragon circled out from the void, exuding infinite power all over its body, pouring into the unparalleled red long sword. Black spells were engraved on the sword. Once the red flame long sword appeared, the surrounding space began to twist and tremble. The unparalleled power of the Overlord swept across the earth, and the fierce beasts and monsters in the city roared in submission. When Wan Quan appears, all things will tremble under his sword. Finally, that sword appears. The man in the bamboo hat couldn't help but jump in his heart the moment Wan Quan Yejian appeared. There was no mistake, that palpitation from the soul. The sky was surging with wind and clouds, and it seemed that even the sky was trembling and fearing under the sudden pressure of Wan Quan. The tightly closed vertical eye in the depths of the sky suddenly opened, and the pupils with golden light carried coldness and indifference to all living things. As if sensing something, the golden vertical eye almost looked out of the clouds and looked somewhere the moment it opened. Until it saw the red figure wearing Zilong armor pulling out the extremely powerful Wan Quan Yejian from the red flame vortex. Feeling the domineering power from the Wang Jian, the cold pupils actually showed a look of shock and anger. The golden vertical pupils looked at Mu Qiu with fierce killing intent. With several loud booms, thunder began to surge above the clouds, and golden lightning rolled in the clouds, revealing a deep anger. A giant hand stretched out from the clouds, shining with golden light and irresistible strong pressure, crushing towards the place below. Looking at this golden giant hand filled with terrifying pressure, the three alien envoys below flashed a look of understanding on their faces. Here it comes. Mu Qiu had expected that when he used the Deyuan level ability, or more precisely, when he pulled out the red flame sword that represented the kingship, he would attract the hostility of the heavenly Dao. And this is exactly what the Yuan cult was waiting for. Heavenly Dao suppression. The giant hand holding up the sky pushed forward with an indescribable majestic momentum. The space shattered wherever it passed, everything trembled, and the whole world seemed to have only this one color left. After the hurricane roared, there was a loud bang, and the giant hand holding up the sky instantly blasted the red armored figure in the air down. The human base below was directly collapsed by the golden giant hand, and a large number of urban buildings were instantly crushed into dust in the air by the aftermath of the pressure. As the smoke and dust dispersed, only a red figure stood tall on the empty land. The Lord of Eternal Night holding the king's sword stood in place, and above his head was the golden giant hand that crushed down. The king's night sword in his hand burst out with a strong pressure, and the candle dragon armor he was wearing had cracks under the strong impact. Blood was seeping out of his forehead, and the expression on Mu Qiu's face became more and more solemn. Obviously, every time Tiandao attacked him, he had the intention of killing him. This time the attack was more fierce than in the Battle of Dawn. It's now, his king's power is the weakest. For the first time, there were some waves in the hollow pupils of the man in the bamboo hat, and his lips moved to chant strangely. At the same time, the space giant python flapped its wings, gathering a majestic space force to press towards the red figure crushed by the golden giant hand in the distance. The ferocious red leopard's approach was even more extreme, and a roar like hitting stone came from his head. It actually directly sacrificed the ancient wild spirit from its body, and the wild spirit body that absorbed the surging blood and chi quickly condensed and expanded, turning into a terrifying beast exuding an ancient atmosphere. The ancient beast, ferocious. As soon as the ferocious beast appeared, the same ferocious look as the red leopard appeared in its eyes, roaring and rushing towards Mu Qiu. The red leopard, whose body had changed back, also flashed and rushed towards the red figure suppressed by the giant hand. The black and red colors swept across the world, and together with the giant hand that stretched out from the sky, it blasted towards the red armored figure. Accompanied by a terrifying earth-shaking roar, the earth collapsed, a hurricane suddenly arose, and the entire city was instantly crushed and destroyed, razed to the ground. The giant hand that held the sky also slowly dissipated under the strong offensive of the three parties, but the sky was still thundering, and a golden vertical eye was staring at the direction of Mu Qiu below. When the world returned to its original color, the dust fell, and in the huge deep pit of the old site of the Wangcheng base. Tick-tock, tick-tock. A red-haired figure stood still, and the roar of the beast could be heard faintly from the red king's sword in his hand. The dark space python and the ferocious beast scattered, all cut down and dissipated by the king's night sword. His red hair fluttered, and the red armor he wore was broken into pieces, and the bright red blood dripped onto the ground that turned into dust. Mewtwo's body was covered with golden imprisonment runes, and on his chest, a bloody claw slowly opened. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 408. Red Leopard's ferocious laughter sounded behind Mewtwo. You are so naive, Lord of Eternal Night. He he. Mewtwo, whose chest was penetrated and whose whole body was imprisoned by word runes, chuckled. An evil smile suddenly appeared on his plain face, and he grinned. It's me who should be said to be naive. As soon as he finished speaking, the black incantation engraved on Wan Quan Yeji Unjian seemed to be alive. They clung to Mewtwo's body like snakes. The word spirit runes that the man in the bamboo hat released to imprison his body were quickly swallowed up by the black spells. At the same time, a large black spell condensed into an ink-like shadow under Mewtwo, spreading in all directions with Mewtwo as the center. The black shadow tide was like a peerless ferocious beast that devoured the sky and the earth, turning everything it passed into darkness. No, get out of that darkness. A flash of surprise flashed in the man's eyes, and he shouted towards the other two emissaries. However, what he didn't expect was that the darkness spread so fast. In an instant, the entire sky turned into pitch black. What's going on? I can't feel the fluctuations of the space barrier. The masked man's tone was strange, and the space barrier he originally laid seemed to have disappeared. Not only that, this darkness gave them an extremely weird feeling. The air here seems to be stagnant, and there is an indescribable sense of death and strangeness in the space. It feels like It's like being in another world. Suddenly, the man in the bamboo hat seemed to remember something and suddenly looked up at the sky. There is also darkness in the sky, with no horizon visible. The eye of heaven disappeared. A look of shock appeared in the hollow eyes, and the golden vertical eye hanging high in the sky disappeared at this moment. Welcome to the world of shadows. A trace of blood oozed from the corner of Mewtwo's mouth, and the blood hole on his chest was still bleeding. Looking at the three people with abnormal expressions, evil smiles appeared on their faces. Under the premise that the entire city was imprisoned by the barrier, he forcibly drove the world of shadow to merge with this space. In this confusing dark space, the heavenly path that threatened him the most was instantly blocked by the world of shadow. Maintaining this shadow space consumes a huge amount of money on Mewtwo herself. Coupled with the injuries he suffered just now under the siege of Tiandeo, it was even worse for Mewtwo. The guy who was in the way is finally gone. Next, it's our solo fight. He was seriously injured, but a look of madness appeared on Mewtwo's evil face. Behind Mewtwo, the shadow of a coiled candle dragon appeared. Just a moment before Wang Cheng base was razed to the ground by King Tian's giant hand. The entire dead city suddenly became boiling under the raging violent energy. Countless ferocious zombies lurking in the darkness of the city sensed the fatal danger and fled in all directions. And a team of dozens of awakened people were also fleeing at high speed on the edge of the city. The vicious roars of ferocious beasts could be heard in their ears, but these awakened ones did not dare to stop at all. The flaming waves mixed with the terrifying attacks of space power swept downwards indiscriminately. Once humans or monsters are involved in this horrific offensive that can be called a disaster, they will all be reduced to dregs without even a chance to struggle. What kind of power is this? The faces of the remaining awakened ones were extremely frightened. They didn't even know what was happening. They were scurrying around on the ground like ants. Look, what is that? Everyone looked for the sound and saw a huge golden vertical eye protruding from the sky, its cold pupils looking down at all living beings. That's an eye. Under the gaze of that eye, a sense of powerlessness from the soul came over my heart. Powerful coercion swept across the earth, and everyone did not even dare to look at it, and subconsciously knelt down. Immediately afterwards, a golden giant hand stretched out from the sky and crushed down towards the ground where everyone was. The surrounding space barriers that were originally imprisoned all experienced chaotic fluctuations the moment this giant hand pressed down. The moment the golden vertical pupils poked out of the clouds, the jade pendant hanging around Yefanyan's neck suddenly burst into intense light. And when the giant golden hand crushed it down, the dark green jade pendant shone even brighter, and a petal-like pattern began to emerge on the surface of the jade pendant. The next second, a beam of light shot out from the jade pendant, hitting a space crack in front of Yefanyan. Looking at the sudden space crack in front of him, Yefanyan's eyes flashed and he shouted to his companions. "It's too late, get in quickly." He turned around and stepped directly into the deep space turbulence. The few surviving awakened companions saw this and had nothing to worry about, and quickly rushed into the space cracks. At the same time, the giant hand in the sky crushed down, and everything in the entire human base turned into nothingness in an instant. The moment the giant golden hand pressed down, the cracks in the cracked space closed. The remaining awakened ones who had not yet entered were instantly annihilated, and the spatial turbulence also sent the survivors to the unknown end. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sign in at the end of the world. Start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 409. In a dark and silent space, an unprecedented battle belonging to the principal source level is breaking out. With a loud bang, Mewtwo's figure appeared on the edge of the dark earth. The red candle dragon armor he was wearing had been broken countless times. The red armor that seems to be alive is still slowly healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. The enchanting blood-colored pupils on the chest, which are like rubies, are full of murderous intent and anger. Stepping lightly, a blood-colored hole appeared on Mewtwo's chest, with bloodshot threads entangled inside and granulation growing. Blood marks also appeared on Mewtwo's forehead, but his expression was as cold as ever. In the black space near Mewtwo, 3 red figures stood quietly. The 3 people also suffered injuries of varying sizes. Some skins became charred and rotten under the burning of black flames, while others were covered in blood, with hideous scars deep into the bones vaguely visible in the flesh and blood. At this moment, the principal level auras emanating from the 3 alien cultists were chaotic and mottled, and they looked at the red figure in the distance holding a king's sword in amazement. The Lord of Eternal Night, this guy, is really a monster. The red leopard whose body was fused with a ferocious beast had a flushed face, spat out a large mouthful of blood, and his eyes were trembling. This is the first time in so many years that he has encountered such a difficult opponent. The black fire that devours all things, the terrifying soul energy, the abnormal body with amazing healing power, and the extremely domineering royal knight sword. The 2 companions not far away were also seriously injured, looking at Mewtwo's figure with burning eyes. On the other hand, Mewtwo, under the siege of the power of heaven and 3 source-level powers, even had scars on his body that were difficult to heal. However, the more crazy the situation became, the evil and crazy color appeared in Mewtwo's eyes. Black incantations flowed on the royal knight sword in his hand, and the sound of dragon roars that shook the world came from the sword. He slowly raised his head and looked at the 3 red figures in front of him. For some reason, the 3 of them couldn't help but feel a chill in their hearts when they looked into those strange blood-red pupils. As the 12 immortals, how long has it been since they felt this kind of heart palpitations? In the dark, they seemed to see a giant dragon wrapped in black flames roaring ferociously at them, with astonishing power. Immediately afterwards, they actually felt that something in their bodies was being pulled out of their bodies. This is soul mantra. No, it's a soul-extracting spell. The man in the bamboo hat was the first to react and kept his composure. The red leopard and the masked man on both sides also came out of their trance. However, in just this blink of an eye, a streak of blood cut through the sky and rushed towards them, and a pair of cold red pupils flashed in the void. Boom! Suddenly, there was a loud noise in the void in front of several people. The floods all over the sky rose into the sky like the Milky Way pouring out, blocking the killing sword that carried the supreme royal power. Boiling black flames and turbulent floods bombarded the space, and hot water waves splashed all over the space. I saw a tall red-robed figure tearing apart the black shadow in the void and standing in front of the three people. The flood around them was overwhelming and the ocean was unbridled. His face and figure were all blocked by the large red robe, but his whole body exuded an indescribable force and coercion. Another principal-level powerhouse? Mewtwo's eyes flashed, and the blood-stained body stood in mid-air. In front of him, four red figures faced him in the air, exuding undisguised murderous aura. Four principal-level powerhouses came out together, and this time the Yuan cult had the intention of killing them. The space around the red-robed figure who suddenly appeared shattered. Large swaths of flood water surged out like a vast ocean, gathering into a majestic dragon in the air and crashing towards Mewtwo. Mewtwo, on the other hand, wielded the Royal Knight Sword, entwined with black flames and karmic fire. Accompanied by bursts of dragon roars, a long red flame dragon coiled around the sky, with endless power. Under the mighty sky, an area completely shrouded in black shadow suddenly heard a violent explosion. Under the overwhelming power, cracks appeared in the originally imprisoned space barrier. Large swaths of blood-colored light spread out in the space, pouring into the cracks in the shattered space. Immediately afterwards, the area shrouded in black shadow was like a deflated ball. The wave of black shadow gradually faded away, and the world returned to its original appearance again. It's just that the hundreds of kilometers that originally belonged to Wangcheng Base were now flattened by fierce fighting, and everything you looked around was covered in dust. The four red-robed envoys of the pagan religion appeared in the ruins of the open space. At this moment, the figures of the four of them were also in extremely miserable condition. Chibeo's entire arm was cut off along the shoulder, and blood was still flowing from the broken wound. The man in the bamboo hat was even more injured in the fierce soul game, and he could barely stand up, spitting out large amounts of blood. The body of the masked man who manipulated the space barrier actually showed cracks like broken lenses, like a vase that broke with a single touch. The red-robed figure who appeared at the last moment was in much better condition. He looked up at the treacherous sky with clouds and remained silent. The man in the bamboo hat spat out a large pool of blood and said in a deep voice, "Under the suppression of the power of heaven, he can still exert such strength. This Lord of Eternal Night dares to openly compete with heaven. He is really powerful and terrifying." The red leopard covered the cut surface of his wound that was spurting blood crazily, and a strong fierce look appeared on his ferocious face. If this person is not completely eliminated, one day he will become a big worry for us. The man in the bamboo hat looked at the red-robed figure with his empty eyes. They were all seriously injured on this trip, and it would take a long time to recover. The red-robed figure who appeared behind seemed to be superior to the three in both strength and status. After a long silence, the voice was low and suppressed. The direction he left, the southern border and the westernmost region. Order everyone in the church to pay close attention to the Lord of the Eternal Night, and do their best to kill him once he appears. The masked man nodded and said, "The pace of the Eternal Night dynasty's expansion is somewhat beyond expectations. Should we?" The red-robed figure looked at the blood color in the sky and said in a low voice, "Don't worry, don't lose the big picture for the small, and ruin the Holy Church's plan. They didn't take the Eternal Night dynasty, which had a few destructive level existences, seriously. It was only a matter of time before they wanted to kill them. If their great cause is about to succeed, let alone a mere Lord of the Eternal Night, all the spirits in the world will kneel down and crawl under his holy church. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the Flame Demon Lord." Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 410. At dawn, the first sunlight scatters through the gaps between the leaves into the dense forest in the mountain stream. There is a trickling stream flowing among the gravel in the mountain stream. However, the originally clear stream water is now stained with blood and turned into a pool of blood. The strong smell of blood soon attracted the attention of some strange beasts in the deep forest. As a rustling sound of footsteps sounded in the dense forest, a huge reindeer walked out from the depths of the forest. The skin of this reindeer showed a strange dark color, bloodshot eyes spread in the white eyes, and even half of the head was rotten to the bone. There is no doubt that this is a mutant reindeer that has turned into a zombie. Smelling the extremely desired smell, the mutant reindeer ran upstream along the turbulent blood flow. The blood color in the stream became more and more intense, and a broken body covered in blood was seen lying flat on the gravel above the stream. The corpse's clothes were tattered, and there was a blood hole on the chest. The blood soaked the whole body and exuded the ultimate temptation. Bloodshot surged in the reindeer's white eyes, and a bloodthirsty look appeared on the rotten face. The mutant reindeer opened its extremely sharp teeth and bit down on the broken corpse. However, just as the fangs were about to touch the flesh, the bloody corpse suddenly moved. He stretched out his arm suddenly, and his extended right arm exploded into a pool of blood mist, which condensed into blood-colored vines, instantly wrapping the huge mutant reindeer. The mutant reindeer began to struggle violently, but its strong body became shriveled and skinny at a speed visible to the naked eye under the entanglement of the blood-colored vines. In a flash, the essence and energy in the mutant reindeer's body had been absorbed, and its body turned into a rotten mummy and collapsed to the ground, and died. The corpse lying on the gravel suddenly opened his eyes. This time, the fun is a bit big. Licking his dry lips, Mewtwo, who withdrew from the candle dragon form, smiled bitterly. Even he didn't expect that this time the Iwan sect would actually design a plan to unite with the Heavenly Deo to kill him. The Heavenly Deo personally took action, and 4 Deyuan level strongmen besieged him. Looking at the world, I'm afraid no one can enjoy the same luxury treatment as him. It seems that I still underestimated the strength of the Iwan section. He couldn't help but think of the words of the mysterious white-robed man in his mind. Is the catastrophe coming? Entering the Deo with the king's power will inevitably attract the hatred and pursuit of the Heavenly Deo. The biggest damage to him in this battle was not the joint kill of the 4 Deyuan level masters, but the suppression and targeting of the power of the Heavenly Deo. Feeling the lack of blood and empty energy in his body, Mewtwo hadn't been injured so seriously for a long time. The physical injury was secondary, but what hurt Mewtwo the most was the destruction of the Black Shadow space. In order to shield the perception of the Heavenly Deo, Mewtwo forced the Black Shadow Kingdom to merge with the space barrier. Although he successfully eliminated the prying of the Heavenly Deo, the Black Shadow space was also damaged in this Deyuan level battle. The Black Shadow channel could not be opened for the time being, so Mewtwo also lost the ability to shuttle through space. In order to repair the broken Black Shadow space as soon as possible, a major prerequisite is that Mewtwo healed his own injuries. At this time, a series of violent roars came from the depths of the dense forest. A large number of ferocious beasts hiding in the jungle were attracted by the strong smell of blood, and the whole dense forest was instantly filled with strange noises. A pair of red and bloodthirsty pupils looked at the corpse by the stream, ready to move. The next moment, a huge figure rushed out of the forest. More and more mutant beasts followed closely, trying to share this tempting corpse. In an instant, the wind was howling, the beasts were galloping, and the crazy scattered branches and leaves indicated that this dense forest was no longer peaceful. As the roar of the beasts gradually subsided, the entire dense forest fell into a dead silence in an instant. The rushing stream hit the gravel on the river bank, and a giant wolf with a shriveled body fell beside the gravel. I saw a large number of beast corpses lying in the stream at some point. These beasts looked extremely terrified, and their huge flesh and blood bodies seemed to have been sucked away at this moment. At the same time, The corpse that collapsed on the gravel heard a crackling sound of bones, and then staggered to stand up. Looking at the deep and dense forest covered with green plants in front of him, Muqiu's eyes flashed with blood. The next moment, Muqiu dragged his blood-stained body and slowly walked towards the depths of the dense forest where countless ferocious beasts were lurking. On the bank of the stream behind him, there were still countless mummified beast corpses lying, and there was still a strong fear in the depths of his pupils. A killing began. Not far away on the other side of the dense forest, several figures with dirty clothes and tired faces were walking along the edge of the dense forest. What on earth happened in Wangcheng Base? The terrifying aura makes me tremble just thinking about it. In the team of several people, a tall man had bloodshot eyes, and the fear in his eyes did not fade away. The team of several people suddenly became silent, and the others also became afraid of those unknown existences. They were the awakened team that went to Wangcheng Base to carry out the mission. However, something unexpected happened to Wangcheng Base, which had turned into an empty city, and the whole city was swept by a terrifying energy. Their team of dozens of people ended up with only a few people left, and they came to this dense forest in a panic through the space crack. Fanyan, thanks to you this time, otherwise we would have died in that base. The handsome man turned his head to look at the young woman behind him, his eyes full of tenderness. Fanyan shook his head slowly, turned around and looked at the twin-tailed girl beside him. Jing Jing, how is your perception now? The twin-tailed girl frowned. It's very strange, the breath of the beasts in the forest suddenly stabilized. Looking at the quiet dense forest in front of them, someone hesitated and said. Or, let's change direction, it looks weird here. But before the voice fell, the jungle in front of everyone suddenly heard a rustling sound of leaves rubbing against each other. Immediately afterwards, a man covered in blood and wearing bloody clothes appeared in front of everyone.